Hey guys, I'm back again. Yes, 2 videos in one day. If you didn't see my other video yet, you might be confused. I'm uploading a traditional knife video this same day. And yes, this is another CATRA video for those of you guys looking at this like another CATRA video. If you don't want to watch it, like I said, I've put up another video, a traditional knife video, but some questions and some comments have come up, and I want to address those things in the video right now. So first of all, I want to update you guys with some information that I've come into over the past few days. First and foremost, the knives have hit the mainland. They are in New York City, not the state. I don't remember the exact borough, but they've cleared customs, and hopefully within the next few days, I'll have the knives here down south. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you guys haven't been keeping up, Laren Thomas of Knife Steel Nerds, he has picked up the report, and he's reported on the report himself. So I'll leave a link to that down below. You guys check him out. If you don't know who Laren Thomas is, he is a PhD metallurgist that has a focus on knife steel as it relates to knives, I guess is the best way to say it. So now to jump into this, I've written down a few of the things that I've heard, and I'm going to kind of explain to you my perspective on some of the things, and then kind of some other how things intertwine. So first of all, do the mistakes matter? That was something I heard a few of you guys ask or comment or state, was that, you know, so what's the big deal that the steel was misstated? What's the big deal about the grammatical errors as far as the comma in the CATRA website address, et cetera, et cetera? If you are a person that is going to publish a scientific document to a journal, usually, part of the requirements are that you do not have any grammatical errors or anything of the sort, let alone an error that deals directly with the objective of your experiment. In this case, we were looking at S30V steel and M390 steel. Now, granted, no, we have not tested 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 knives. No, the knives are not of the same make and model. We can get into that. If you guys want that to happen, the link will be down below. Please donate. Please send your knives. Send me an email. I will accept your knives. We will run more tests if that is what you all want to do. However, just as it happened the first time, it's going to require you all's help. As you can see, just to test these 4 knives here, we had $600 worth of testing. And that's not to count the fact that I'm going to send all these knives off to Kurt. When I get the knives back, I'm going to have to send all the knives to the owners of the knives. So that's just the cost for CATRA. That's not the other costs. So keep that in mind, guys. And yes, if you picked up on that, these knives will be going out to Kurt for independent Rockwell testing as well, so we can kind of see where everything lines up. And I haven't talked to the guys about this either. The Project Action Group, which was responsible for this report, or the guys in the testers, as they've been called, about this. But I would love to see these knives run on cardboard sharpened with a wicked edge system or something of that nature, so we can get a consistent angle, which did not happen in this test, and then run on cardboard to compare the results from one test to the other. Anyway, mistakes, do they matter? I was saying, if you're going to publish this, let me show you. This is a research and development consultancy services. This is science, guys. This is what everybody deemed that wanted this done as science. They're telling us that they're research and development consultancy services. This is a scientific organization. Cutlery and Allied Trades Research Association. This is a scientific document. Scientific documents don't go out with mistakes, guys, let alone mistakes that deal with one of the variables that you're looking at in your experiment, in your test, as we're commonly calling it. So that is why I brought those things up. Those are literal requirements. If I was going to submit this as a scientific researcher or research agency to a journal, a peer-reviewed journal, which is the standard in research, that is one of the requirements, that it is free from errors or any mistakes in the research process. So, with that being said, let's move on to the next one. Was this a waste of money? Guys, I don't think this was a waste of money, because we were able to see exactly what all this test entails, and we were also able to see, granted, again, let me say it one more time, this test was run one time. If you all want to see it run more than one time, we will gladly accept your donations. I will gladly make sure this test gets run again. But we were able to at least get a snapshot of this type of testing compared to the bro science that has occurred previously. And those things have kind of shown at least somewhat of a correlation. And Laren kind of talks about that in his article, but you guys can go over there and read that. Again, Laren Thomas, Knife Steel Nerds. But anyway, that correlation, that ties into my next question, comment, interaction that occurred this week. I had someone comment, and they told me that they had been followers of Michael Christie and Super Steel Steve, and these test results didn't line up with what Michael Christie or Super Steel Steve said. So basically, they were saying that, you know, this goes against what those guys are saying. Honestly, I don't know what Michael Christie is saying, because what I know of Michael Christie is he talks a little bit about geometry. He talks a little bit about composition. He talks a lot about sharpening, and he talks a lot about sharpness. So that's what I know of Michael Christie. I know Super Steel Steve to sharpen, to test, to talk about composition, geometry, protocol, the hardness, etc., etc., etc. So I don't really know where the guy was coming from, but that was the question. So with all of that being said, I'm going to break down exactly how this relates to what I know of Super Steel Steve to have said. And I spoke with him, so I know that I'm not going out on a limb. I'm not putting words in his mouth. He's in agreement with the results that have come back from this test. His results are in agreement with what has come back from this test. Outpost 76, Gerald's results are in alignment with what's come back from this test. And Kenny in the Pocket's results are in line with what has come back from this test. So take that for what you will. But anyway, how do those things relate? How do these things intertwine? You have four main categories. As it's been put, there are four legs to a table. And if any one of those legs is shorter or longer, you impact the functionality of the entire table. So what are we talking about, Clint? We're talking about composition. We're talking about the actual heat treatment protocol. We're talking about the geometry, and we're talking about the hardness. So let's start at the top and we'll work our way down. And notice that hardness is at the bottom of the list. All of these things are interrelated, so all of these things are equally as important, but for whatever reason, hardness has been the one that's been blown out of proportion and focused on, and it's been said to have only been discussed. So, composition. In this case, we're going to talk about these things as they relate to this test, so that way we're talking apples to apples, because the guy I was talking to, he switched to Oz 8 and S30V, and I really didn't follow that, and it didn't have anything to do with this, which is how we started the conversation. So, S30V and M390. Those two steels have two different chemical compositions. S30V is a general use steel. Good all around, good corrosion resistance, good edge retention, good toughness, etc., 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 good edge stability, so on and so forth. It is a knife steel that is going to be fine. It's not going to give you any issues. It's going to be reasonably easy to sharpen. It's going to hold an edge reasonably well. It's going to resist rolling and chipping reasonably well. It is just a good all-around steel. Now, composition of M390. M390 has more potential to hold an edge longer. It's more wear resistant. Also, as Larry discussed today, it is also slightly more corrosion resistant than S30V. So, and keeping in mind, we're talking about these things in optimal conditions, because obviously, and I know naming names is controversial, but we've seen the discussion with Chris Reeves and the S30V when it was run a little bit softer about how it rolled, so on and so forth. Then they upped it, and all that talk has gone away. So not only is that a real world example of how S30V performs, but that's also a real world example of heat treatment protocol and Rockwell hardness as it relates to end user performance. So that's composition. Protocol, which I just kind of talked about. When you heat treat a steel, you are going to run through a process of heating and then tempering that steel in order to align the matrices within that steel. You are basically trying to refine the grain structure of that steel to maximize the chemical potential. So again, we're tying back into that chemical potential. If your protocol is not up to par, if something is not right with your protocol, if your holding times aren't correct, if your temperatures aren't correct, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, your matrices are not going to be formed correctly, and you're going to see kind of what happened with the Kershaw knife in this test. The Kershaw knife was the hardest knife in the test across the board, S30V or M390, but it was not the top performing knife, S30V or M390. So, with that being said, that is how protocol ties into this whole equation, and that is an example of protocol and what happens when protocol is not performed to an optimal extent. That's how I put it. Geometry. This is basic physics. If you have a knife, and we're talking behind the edge thickness, so if you've got a bevel on a knife, we're talking about the shoulder of that bevel. We're talking about right where the primary grind ends and that secondary grind starts. We're talking about that shoulder. If that shoulder has a larger profile, if it's thicker behind the edge, you're going to have more surface area, which is going to make the knife harder to press through materials. This is going to make the knife feel less sharp sooner, because if that apex isn't very, very refined, aka very sharp, then that means you're going to have to push harder, and you're going to be pushing against more surface area, which is going to require more force. So that is how that ties in, because your knife is going to feel like it's less sharp, even though the apex of the knife may be equally as sharp as another knife. You're pushing more surface area through a material, which is going to make it feel less sharp. Finally, hardness. Laren has an excellent graph of this. You saw me talk about the percentage differences between the steels in my other video. Long and the short of it is, the harder a steel is, following an appropriate protocol, being optimally treated for that chemical composition, that steel is going to have more wear resistance than a softer steel that, again, it follows all the things I just said. So that is how those four things are interrelated, and that is how this report relates to what Super Steel Steve was saying and everybody else. Again, I don't know about Michael Christie, no disrespect to him. I just don't know him as somebody that really talks about those types of things. I know him as a guy that talks about sharpening, the sharpening process, refining the apex, and how sharp a knife is. So appreciate you guys watching. Again, we'll be doing some follow-ups. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, post them down below. I love to hear from you guys. I'll catch you in the next video. Remember, a lazy man carries a dull knife.